Welcome to Sputnik, orbiting the world, with me, George Galloway.
And me, Gayatri.
Short of predictions of Russian soldiers with snow on their boots in Oxford Street, you'd think we were entering a wintry phase of a new Cold War. British politicians and their media echo chamber are in overdrive, trying to hang Russia out to dry.
First it was Pussy Riot, then gay rights. Now it's the Russian response to the Western provocation in the Ukraine. Although, as the name suggests, the G20 consists of more than the US and its usual satellites, you would have thought that China, India, Brazil, South Africa, Indonesia, Turkey, which together accounts for half the world's population, hadn't shown up in Brisbane last week. All the news was about the supposed shirt-fronting of President Putin.
The aggro came from men, well, one woman, with white faces, but their buffer boots were a little threadbare, teetering around bankruptcy, as most of them are. But what's it all about, really? Why would the citizens of austerity Europe and the USA want to pick a fight with Russia and her friends? Helping us answer this riddle wrapped in a mystery, inside an enigma, is Alexander Nekrasov, former Kremlin advisor. But first,
let's take a look at what the people on the streets had to say about Russia. Do they feel threatened by the Russian bear?
Yes, I do think they're bad.
Why?
I'm a gay person anyway, so just think it's really bad what they're doing to people like that, and the whole Ukraine thing's a bit...
Well, what are they doing?
Pardon?
What are they doing?
Their whole laws on homosexuality I don't find should be like something that's enforced in everyday life now, so yeah. Just think they're a bit behind and backwards at the moment.
There's a lot of violence, or in the media here, there's portrayed a lot of violence against homosexuals in Russia and it being made illegal, although I'm not sure if that's correct in my understanding, but and that's something when you live in quite a liberal, westernized society, kind of doesn't feel right.
No, I'm ex-military and I don't really see it as a threat. It's a big power. If it gets back in power, it will be a big power, but at the moment, no.
The way Putin is thinking, it's something like communist era.
Yeah, like,
you know?
Can you explain their way of thinking?
Yeah, like he's doing what he wants, because he wants all the gas and the petrol and everything, and the big powers from West countries, they don't have enough courage to go to him straight away. See, look, you've done too much already.
I think America will have another war they want the Cold War back. It's about arms. It's about selling arms to different countries.
Alexander, a mixed bag of popular reactions, and it's hardly surprising. I've got the Daily Mail from earlier this week, almost a spoof headline. It says, Russians spy on UK families via their webcams. Enough to chill the bone of every parent in the land. That Boris, with snow on his boots, is watching their children in their bedrooms or watching their kids brushing their teeth. This is becoming almost hysterical, isn't it?
Well, it is hysterical. I think it's been hysterical since last November when events started to unravel in Ukraine. I think that what we are witnessing here is Soviet-style propaganda, strangely enough.
Against Russia.
Against Russia, so it turns against Russia. And the interesting thing is, everyone is avoiding the main point, what happened in February, when a legitimate government was overthrown, basically in an armed coup.
Exactly.
Yes, by violence.
Exactly.
And that is where the whole thing started.
Yes.
But nobody remembers that for some reason in the Western media. It's always the events move forwards, and we talk about Crimea only, as if Crimea was something that Putin decided, guys, let's take over Crimea. That was nothing like that. First of all, what they don't understand, these hacks, I mean, is that Putin reflects what the Russian people want. He's not Cameron or Obama who decide, let's go into Libya, or let's go into Iraq, or let's go, I don't know where else they're going to go, Syria probably. And
they are there already. Yeah.
Well, they're probably going to go in big time. And the point here is that it's always Putin did that, Putin did this, and he decided, and so on. And this, I think, is a very important point that is being missed. It's the people of Crimea who decided to go back to Russia. It's not that Putin said to them to come back.
Not quite. Now, we'll come in a minute to that very last point that the former military man in your Vox Pops said, that it's about selling arms, it's about creating tension in the world for political and even military-industrial reasons. We'll come to that. You say the hacks have forgotten that.
Well,
that's not
forgotten.
Yeah, yes. I mean, it isn't true. They haven't. These are educated fellows. They are, in many cases, highly educated people. They know very well the sequence of events. It's willful distortion of the truth. I mean, Russians spy on UK families via their webcams.
It's laughable.
I mean, why wasn't that thrown out as an April Fool joke? Instead of being on the front page of almost the biggest selling newspaper in the country.
You know what they forgot to mention? That this website, this Russian website, actually revealed these clips from about 120 countries. Britain is just a small part of it. And these are all webcams, sort of private ones, which are showing rooms and baby webcams and so on, which make no sense, of course. The moment you read the article, you realize it's the headline.
The people who are spying on all UK families is the British government. GCHQ,
well, the American
MI5,
government
MI6,
as well.
Edward Snowden told us all about it. Read all about it. I mean, that headline should have said, British authorities spy on UK families via their mobile phone, their internet, their webcam and everything else. Probably got somebody up your chimney.
But not forgetting the Americans, by the way, who are spying after everyone. Everyone.
Even on Angela Merkel. Now, here's the point. Why did all these, the Anglo-Saxon governments, we can understand, the famous five of the former settler states, plus Britain, that unity is always. Why does Angela Merkel tamely go along behind Barack Obama's policy when it is deeply damaging to the German economy, which is already now moving into slump, and when the Americans were tapping her own personal telephone?
Well, I think it's a bigger game here. First of all, we must understand that America is trying to drive a wedge between Russia and Europe. This has got a political and commercial side to it. This is the whole game of this crisis in Ukraine. It needs to cut Russia off and flood the European markets with its own goods because it's sinking. America is bankrupt, let's face it. It's the only way it can save itself is if it takes over Europe through that dodgy free trade agreement which is trying to impose on them. With Merkel, now here is a difficult one because her own party is actually up in arms against her. Not all of them, but some of them. And I think she's playing a dangerous game here because the German economy is the biggest loser of them all if they cut off Russia completely. So I don't really, it's like a death wish. You know, she has a death wish, I think. Because
Maybe they found something compromising on her telephone.
Well, that is something I thought about as well. And you know why I thought about this? Remember when she went to the United States? Before that, when she met Obama, before that, she was a bit, you know, she was a bit
quite
restrained.
feisty, yeah.
She was sort of saying, no, we should find a way around it. There were actually negotiations going on between Germany, Russia, and Ukraine behind the scenes. And so she was in a different... And then suddenly, after that visit and meeting Obama, she changed completely. Now, I was thinking at the time, it's my suspicions, but maybe, you know, they found something in her past when she was living in GDR that they could use against her, because I couldn't understand the transformation and the logic.
Hard to
She's not that stupid, is she?
Another way, yeah.
What about the Russian people themselves, the population? Are they aware of this whole Cold War rhetoric that's being resurrected? Well, here in the West, how is it? How is it being received there?
Well, I've been watching the Russian websites and in particular Russian bloggers, you know, who respond immediately to everything, and they will respond to that story as well. And I can tell you that yes, of course they realize the situation and they realize the massive, massive propaganda that's going in the Western press, in the Western world, politicians as well. But the point is, and this is my opinion, personal opinion, I don't think that the Cold War had actually gone. The reason being, if it did, NATO would not have existed. But once NATO started to move eastwards, that meant the Cold War in a different type, in a different way. I'm not saying it's the same Cold War, but it started to sort of get back on the cards again. And when they went into Ukraine, and they did go into Ukraine, let's face it, that was basically the beginning of the Cold War again. Russia cannot allow NATO to be in Ukraine.
No, of course.
It's as simple as that. Putin had no choice but to respond. I think the West misjudged Russia's reaction. I think they thought they could swallow them like the Baltics or Bulgaria, Romania, and, you know, pay nothing for it. Just take it over. And it didn't work. And then they were absolutely astonished with Crimea. They did not realize that this could happen. And what they also didn't understand is that when they were saying, but yes, but Putin sent his troops there, you know, to take over Crimea. The troops were there already, in agreement with Ukraine. 25,000 soldiers and officers at the naval base in Sevastopol. And that base is the pride of Russia. And the guys, I know these people. These are real patriots of Russia. They were always saying, you know, Crimea has always been Russian. You know, 80%, well, 70-something% are Russian, ethnic Russians. And that was not Putin sending troops. That were the troops and the Russians there deciding to take it back to Russia.
Alexander, it's been a pleasure talking to you on board the Sputnik. Coming up after the break, we'll up the temperature and go Latino. Don't miss it. Welcome back to Sputnik. At the end of this month, in the prestigious headquarters of the TUC in London, a galaxy of star speakers, yes, including yours truly, will gather for a conference on Latin America.
Prime among this August lineup will be Dr. Aleida Guevara. She's the daughter of Che Guevara, a man whose star shines even brighter in Argentina than Lionel Messi, even though Che hasn't been around to score a goal for 47 years.
One of the conference organisers is Matt Wilgris of the Venezuela Solidarity Campaign, and we're glad to welcome him on board the Sputnik. Matt, we'll talk about Venezuela in a minute, but tell us about this Latin America conference. What's the range of subjects, speakers, organisers, and how do people, even at this late hour, get to it?
Thanks, George. The Latin America conference is on Saturday, November 29th at TUC Congress House in central London. You can register or get the programme at www.latinamerica2014.org.uk. In terms of the agenda of the day, there's over 25 different workshops covering all aspects of Latin America, country-specific workshops on Cuba, Colombia, Venezuela, which I'm involved in, Ecuador, Nicaragua, Bolivia and so on, but also topics on themes, so looking at things like the role of Latin America in providing solidarity to the Palestinians and working for peace in the world, the role of free education and the student movements in Latin America. Che Guevara's daughter, Aleida Guevara, is like the keynote speaker of the conference this year, and she's speaking in, I think, 4 different sessions. One, a sort of a plenary session to the whole conference, 2 organised by the Cuba Solidarity Campaign, 1, I think, with your good self. And then she's also introducing a film that she made about the late Hugo Chavez in another session as well, which I'll be introducing alongside her.
Well, that allows us to segue into Venezuela. It's 2 years ago. You and I were on the streets campaigning in Chavez's last victory.
And you know, this one scene that we witnessed that stays in my mind so strongly when we were walking the streets of Caracas. There was this argument between this elderly lady and a young school student. And they were quite loud about it. And it turns out that she was angry at the young boy for calling her a capitalista. Amazing. Only in Venezuela. Only in Venezuela,
yeah.
I thought.
I think he called her that because she had a nice coat on her. It was quite an unfair allegation. But the one I remember is, as we stood, in fact, I shed a tear, this large group of very poor women moving along the street, joyously singing Chavez, Corazon del Pueblo, the heart of the people. It was a simply unforgettable visit, and he seemed like a bull that day in the rain.
In the rain.
And yet he was taken from us so swiftly. How's the country coped with the loss of President Chavez?
Well, I think the immediate aftermath of President Chavez's death obviously saw a great outpour of grief and sympathy, and, you know, literally hundreds of thousands of people on the streets. They had to keep the coffin open for days and days on end so everyone could go and pay their respects. But I think what is concerning is that people who are opposed to the sort of elected government in Venezuela and the Chavista project, if you like, have seen the death of Chavez as an opportunity to destabilise and undermine the revolution, and in their eyes ultimately overthrow the successor to Chavez, the elected former trade union leader and foreign minister Nicolas Maduro. And so in the last year, basically last year and a half, Maduro's been elected, and since January we've seen different attempts from the sort of extreme elements of the right-wing opposition in Venezuela to undermine and destabilise the elected government. And I think we should also remember on a show like this that the US role in supporting and funding to the tunes of millions of dollars those extreme right-wing elements in Venezuela. So as a campaign we've sort of titled what's going on as After Chavez, the Empire Strikes Back. And so there's a number of concerning elements to the situation at the moment for people who support democracy and social progress in Venezuela.
Well, the United States supports democracy so much they're ready to spend billions to overthrow the product of it. They have done in the Ukraine successfully, and they are trying so far unsuccessfully to do the same in Venezuela. But what about the local actors? There appears now, I'm sorry to say, to be the development of a kind of death squad potential. I lived through the death squads in El Salvador and in Nicaragua, and I saw for myself with my own eyes some of their grisly handiwork. A very young Chavista parliamentarian was murdered horrifically with his partner at home. Tell us about that.
Well, recently, on the 1st of October, there was a murder of Roberto Serra, who was the youngest member of the National Assembly in Venezuela, a young lawyer and the leader of the youth wing of the Socialist Party, which is the governing main political party in the parliament in Venezuela, to which the president belongs. And he was found murdered alongside his assistant in his home. And obviously there's police investigations and so on, criminal proceedings are ongoing. But the former president of Colombia, Ernesto Samper, who isn't a man of the left, but is now a leading figure in UNISUR, which is, in a simplistic way, is a bit like the Latin American European Union. He said that it showed a worrying infiltration of Colombian paramilitarism into Venezuela, and obviously far-right paramilitaries in Colombia have been a concern to supporters of democracy and the left for a long time. But also this tragedy comes within a historical context of the elements of the Venezuelan opposition consistently trying to do things outside the sort of electoral game, basically because they keep losing elections. And they've lost 2 elections, national elections, it should be remembered, since Chavez died. So if they were banking on Chavez dying to mean they would come back immediately to power, the electoral route didn't provide that. So some elements, obviously, the opposition in Venezuela are looking at all sorts of different things. So earlier in the year, we had the La Salida movement, which I think you covered on this very programme, which was a sort of series of violent street actions aimed at destabilising the situation in Venezuela, but that sort of died out.
They've died out now.
But, a number of innocent people lost their lives as a result of that, and the stated aim of that campaign, political aim, was the ousting of the constitutional elected government before the end of its term. So we need to be very vigilant about the situation in Venezuela.
And are the Chavistas vigilant?
I think so. I think a lot of people, obviously, the situation, you get a lot of media misrepresentation here in Britain about it, but the situation earlier in the year, all things considered, you know, at the end of that, President Maduro still had much higher approval ratings than the opposition. The country sort of got back to normal and, you know, continues to try and announce a whole wave of new programmes and social progress in a number of issues. So I think, you know, speaking personally, I've been immensely impressed with President Maduro's leadership in what obviously was Chavez dying first, then this violent campaign, and now things like this assassination is not an easy time.
No, he's been a towering presence in the last year and a half.
Literally.
But I'm wondering, yes, literally. I'm wondering how united the left is in Venezuela. One hears or reads stories, admittedly, in hostile newspapers, and I don't read Spanish, so I don't really get the other side. I'm wondering, we hear these stories about pro-Chavez revolutionary people sort of taking the law into their own hands and not being happy with this or that aspect of the new government. Tell us about that.
I think you're right, there's people obviously who have a interest in opposing the revolution, and the government exaggerate divisions in Venezuela on the left. But equally, Venezuela isn't, you know, it's a new sort of form of 21st century socialism in its own eyes, which is evolving. So it isn't a one-party state. And within the left, although nearly everyone is in the United Socialist Party, which brought together over 40 organisations, there are other organisations like the Communist Party of Venezuela and some sort of the PPT and others that support the government that aren't in that. So there will be disagreements on a political level between those parties, for example. But at the Congress of the governing party, which was quite recently, the reports I read in Spanish, the majority of them, like the main people who organised a sort of opposition press conference saying they were sort of opposed to Maduro but were Chavista, weren't even delegates to the conference. They organised a sort of, you know, I think a very small group of people. And also I think we have to be very wary of a lot of these media stories about people taking the law into their own hands unless we know the specifics of the case. But I think in terms of the discussions going on since Chavez and Chavismo, it's also important to understand that, and going back to the conference that we discussed, that there's also a regional unity emerging in Latin America amongst the left, which strengthens Maduro's hand in that situation.
Yes, it does,
well.
and indeed even unites people who are not all entirely of the left, but who could be described as patriotic Latin Americans. Tell us finally about the Venezuela Solidarity Campaign. How do people join it? What does it do?
So the Venezuela Solidarity Campaign next year will be celebrating our 10th anniversary. I think George is doing one of these events in February. I don't know if he knows that yet. But we'll be having a season of events to celebrate our 10-year anniversary. If people want more information or to join, they can go to www.venezuelasolidarity.co.uk. We've got a wide spectrum of support. We work closely with a group of people in Parliament. We've had backing from the TUC and most of the trade union movement. And we see our aims in a lobbying sense as to lobby that the British government doesn't follow the hostility of the US administration towards Venezuela, which is very real, and the threat of US sanctions is not just on the table, but is slowly being rolled out now as Obama reacts to the Republicans gains in the Senate and so on. But also to tell the truth about Venezuela and to present a picture that we regard as a more real picture of Venezuela than you see on the media, a picture of, you know, mentions the gains in health and education and poverty reduction and so on, which isn't to say there isn't problems in any country, of course, but it doesn't give, you know, it gives a counter to the relentless negative coverage that sadly we see in so much of the media.
Fairness in the British media. I saw a pig flying by. Matt Wilgris, thanks for joining us on board the Sputnik. And now it's your turn to tell us what you think through the portals of social media. What's rattling, Gayatri?
Well, when we tweeted the Daily Mail's headline of Russians spying on our activities in and out of the house, we received such a funny response, so much funny responses to it. Alistair McIntosh says, well, it must be right, it's in a Daily Fail. And Rachel Devoy responds, well, when the US and UK spy, it's for our own good. But when Russia spy, it's bad. Give me a break.
It's not even true.
It's not even
I mean, the idea that Russia, with all its many problems, is over here looking at people in Milton Keynes, what they're doing in their kitchen.
But as you said, it should have been on April 1 as an April Fool joke.
Yeah, but a lot of fools fall for it. And there's millions of fools. Read the Daily Mail. Or the Daily Fail, as she called it.
On Venezuela, will Comandante Chavez's legacy survive? Che Brent answers, he changed the world, so how could he not?
Well, that's no guarantee, because the world can change and change back and change again. 2 steps forward, one step back. Let's hope it's only 1 step back.
Well, that's it that we have for this week.
Which means that's the end of the show.
Stay in touch with us on Twitter at RT_Sputnik and on Facebook on Sputnik on Russia Today. It's goodbye from me, Gayatri.
And from me, George Galloway. It's been marvellous.